Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antic Society tasting, our first for 2025. I had some thoughts about what to do for this first tasting of the new year, and I thought maybe a repeat, but instead I've gone for maybe more of a Christmassy feel rather than a New Year feel. But what I've done is I've gone for a tasting I've called A Very Sherry New Year 2025. And it's because I have three sherried whiskies that I'd really like to nose and taste and give you my thoughts on. Sherry bombs almost, although the first of them isn't so much a sherry bomb. We have in the lineup tonight an Octave comes in a nice box with some nice details here on the box. It's a Glen Garioch from 2012, 11-year-old cask number 463823, and it spent 3 months in an Octave cask and is bottled at 53.8%. So that's the first of our lineup tonight. And the second in our sherry tasting is it's again from Duncan Taylor. The Octave range from the Glen Garioch is from Duncan Taylor. Second one is a single cask, again a nice box, Duncan Taylor with some details here. Single cask Glentauchers, 12-year-old, cask number 85900534, bottled at 54.7%, and on here it says sherry cask. So that's the second in our lineup. And then third in our lineup of this very sherry new year is something rather special. It's a Signatory vintage, no box with this one, Secret Speyside M 2011 13-year-old 100 proof edition, 57.1%. I'll explain a little bit more later why that one is rather special. I'm also going to compare three different whisky tasting glasses, but we'll get into that as we go on. The first whisky we have is the Octave Glen Garioch 2012 11-year-old cask 463823, which spent 3 months in an Octave and bottled at 53.8%. So Glen Garioch is a Highland whisky that was, for most of its 200-year existence, used in blends. The name is in reference to a stretch of land known as the Granary of Aberdeenshire, on account of its being fertile for growing crops. Glen Garioch, it transpires, used to be a full complement operation, from buying neighbouring barley and operating in-house malting to distilling and warehousing. It all happened on site. A checkered history saw various exchanges of ownership, a few mothballings, one due to a lack of water source, before a reopening in the early 70s. Upon discovery of a new silent water spring next door, before it was then mothballed again in 1995. At that point, the Garioch was a peated whisky. However, it was relaunched in 1997 as a new style unpeated whisky, and that endured through the early noughties before being rebranded in 2009 into the aesthetic guise as we find it today. And the current owners of Glengarioch are the behemoth Signatory. The Glengarioch website uses some interesting statements, and it's perhaps an indication of both the commitment of their place in the whisky sphere, but also making it quite clear that they have no inkling towards changing. Phrases like small but loyal band of followers are used in a self-aware appreciation of how under the radar their whisky is. Uh, they also pair all their expressions with various cheeses, which is quite unique. There's faded tartan and fall parchment textures in abundance, sepia photographs and wistful tales of the old days. It's whisky done with a theoretical head swoosh towards the past. And it's surprising to me, given the typical modern expectation of business, no matter what the trade is, to expand and grow and make bigger and better. Yet Glengarioch is content with just being. It's fascinating to think this malt, which is produced by one of Scotland's oldest distilleries, and up until those over-aggressors Brewdog moved in, was the most easterly of all Scotland's malt houses. It's fascinating how they're making such endearing whisky with no fanfare. There's no indication they're looking to become more popular and just going quietly about their day. Or are they? The pandemic arrived in 2020 and Glengarioch seized the opportunity to close their doors and start some housekeeping. With £6 million pumped into a full refurbishment of the distillery. This included a return to in-house floor maltings, a new direct-fired still, and, in a nod to the changing times, a 15% reduction in their carbon footprint. It reopened in March 2022 with little fanfare. There's a slight worry that this money will need to be recouped somehow, and with owners being Signatory also in charge of brands such as Auchentoshan, Bowmore and Lafroig, arguably tourist malts, one does wonder if the Geary might become a bit of a tourist spot or two. It's an integrity malt, and I just hope that it doesn't turn into watered down mints like so many unfortunate whiskies that cater to tourism palates. Mortlach 16 is a case in point. So this one, the Glengarioch Octave Cask number 4683243 from Duncan Taylor has aged for 11 years in oak cask, then spent the final 3 months in a sherry Octave cask. It's a release of only 79 bottles, and bottled at cask strength of 53.8%, non-chill filtered and naturally coloured. So what is Octavation? Well, for upwards of 40 years, the team at Duncan Taylor have experimented by maturing whiskies in smaller casks with great success. Their research stemmed from the simple premise that there is more wood interaction with whisky over a shorter period in a small cask than in a large cask, therefore allowing a more rapid melding of wood, air and alcohol. An octave is a quarter of the size of a barrel, offering up only 50 litres worth of space. So they reserve the octaves for special finishes as they offer high contact between the wood and the spirit. So they use them for their special single cask bottlings. After a second maturation, the octave casks refine the whiskey, enhancing its hue, taste, form, and character. You can see this one has taken on, for a 11-year-old, quite a dark hue here. So an octave is a quarter of the can size of a barrel, offering up only 50 litres. So the flavour profile is greatly expanded, a little more sophisticated, with the commanding presence of a mature, well-balanced whiskey. And Duncan Taylor said they've become octave invigorated. So it's extensive, the octave collection, and has covered a lot of different distilleries, be it single malt, single grain, or sometimes even blended malt whiskey. So they use the octave cask up to 3 times. For the first fill octaves, they finish the whiskey for 3 months. For second fill, 6 months. For third fill, 9 months. And they have their own cooperage and deconstruct sherry casks and then rebuild them as the smaller octave casks. So let's see what we have. For this one, I'm using a mini Glencairn. You're probably all familiar with a Glencairn gas. This is a mini Glencairn. I've chosen it because this one has the Glengarioch labelling on it. So the Glencairn is considered a robust vessel. Its short, solid base makes for a stable glass, popular if you don't favour stems. And it's also somewhat thicker, and so it's more substantial for convivial drinking. And with the larger Glencairn, it's the perfect glass for learning how to swirl whiskey too. This is a smaller one, so I've got to be a bit more careful. The reason for swirling is to open up the aromas of the whiskey for full appreciation. And the bowl shape here channels aromas towards the narrowed rim. So it's a modern, less showy relative to the tulip flavour glass. And the Glencairn is pretty much solely dedicated to whiskey. And as I said, I've chosen this one because it has the Glencairn livery on it. So let's see what we have here on the nose. And I'm getting dry oak, lots of apricot, tinned apricot, cornflakes, sugar, frosties, brown sugar, clove and orchard fruit. There's a little whiff of leather there, hay, some feta cheese, dried fruit, malt, maple glazed walnuts, caramel, cloves, and of course sherry, toffee crisp bars, dried dates, figs, raisins, and you get that sort of wet wood smell as well. And I've just chopped up my Christmas tree for recycling, and you get that. It was in the snow I was doing it. You get that sort of wet wood aroma off of this, and it's sweet, heavy fruit on the nose. And then you get some red fruits, a bit of plasticine, aniseed, sultanas, treacle and golden syrup. And with time, I'm starting to get some plums, figs, and a light pepper spice from the alcohol. Buttery brioche. Red berries again, currants. It's quite a jammy malt on the nose. The sherry isn't overpowering or anything. In fact, it balances with the spirit perfectly. And you know what? I don't know if you remember these sweets with sort of sherbet in them. The flying saucers, sort of sweet sherbet in a drying paper casing. Tons of dried fruits dipped in sugar, raisins, sultanas, apricots. Very nice nose on this. And now I'm going to try them out. Let's see, there are some lovely tears in this whiskey. So let's see what we've got in the mouth here. Vanilla cupcakes, stone fruits, caramel, honey roasted nuts, and subtle spices. It's quite dry, intense sherry with this, followed by the dried fruit, the leather, the hay, the cloves, and the feta cheese. Ripe, fruity, malty sweetness with orange peel, sour fruit chews, bitter coffee, and brown sugar. There's a subtle floral quality lingering in the background, and you do get that hint of synthetic sweetness that you associate with Glengarioch Spirit's character. And the finish is sort of a vanilla and oak spices. It's very dry with long-lasting sherry and leather. Again, you get some of that maple glazed walnuts, caramel, cloves, and dried fruit. Slightly alcoholic. The leather and cloves leave a smoky impression. Finish is a good length, dominated by the drier sherry notes. It's quite dry, but the cakey vanilla lingers on the palate for a long while. I'm going to try, let's see. I'm going to try I've got 10 drops of water in there. That's more than I usually add at first, but I've had this before, and I think it'd be interesting to see where we go with water in this. See, the nose is, water brings out a sort of mustiness and a savouriness. It's like pistachio. Most of the nose without water carry over, but you get some light hay and heather coming through, which is still a bit subdued. With water, you get some nice perfumed floral notes to add to the fruit aromas that were present before the water. We'll try the mouth. It's a bit spicier with water, less dry and sour, with a strong note of orange juice. Slightly sweeter with some red fruit starting to emerge. Milk chocolate, and then you get that white pepper. Coats the mouth very well. A sort of fresh buttercream frosting. The finish continues to be a good length, with more sweetness lingering. So, this Glen, an Aberdeenshire malt based in Old Meldrum. And Glen, if you've had the 12-year-old, it reflects the area it is based in. Golden farmland with a malty sweetness. This octavated Glen is what sherry cask should taste like. Too many bottlers rely on heavy sherry finishes that turn the whisky one shade from black and completely overpower any spirit character. Tasting this brings me back to why I fell in love with sherry cask matured whisky in the first place. In one word, this Glen is outstanding. Whisky doesn't have to be old to be good. So I'm going to cleanse my palate with a Nairn's organic oatcake, or half of one. And I've got here a bottle of Smart Water, it's called. 100% recyclable. So, next up, we have a single cask, Duncan Taylor single cask, Glentauchers, 12-year-old, cask number 859000534, bottled at 54.7%. So, Glentauchers distillery is located in Speyside, just a few miles from Keith, up the road to Craigellachie. There's no visitor centre at Glentauchers, and it may be one reason why the distillery is not that well known. But the more important reason is probably that there are very few bottles of bottlings of Glentauchers single malt whisky. Almost the whole production of Glentauchers is used for blended whisky. It's said to be a key component in the blend, Ballantines and Teachers. And there's another blend Glentauchers is closely related to. The founder of the distillery, James Buchanan, is the father of Black and White as well. There's only been released one official bottling of Glentauchers single malt whisky by the distillery itself, which was a 15-year-old in the year 2000. Gordon MacPhail, Duncan Taylor as here, Douglas Lang and some other smaller independent bottlers offer releases of Glentauchers, but it's not a single malt that is often seen. In its character, the Glentauchers whisky shows fruity, malty and sweet aromas. So this one that we're going to taste now is it's independently bottled by Duncan Taylor. It spent a dozen years maturing in a single sherry cask. I think almost certainly an Oloroso, but possibly a hogshead. Between 2009 and 2022, when the cask was opened to release an outturn of 727 bottles. And this is bottle 554, so distilled in October 2008 and bottled in May 2023. So not 2009-2022, it's 2008-2023. And it's a total outturn of 693 bottles. So for this one, I'm going to use the neat whiskey glass, which is a bit of a new one. And it's one for technically minded. It's resulted from a mistake made in a glass blowing factory. Subsequent testing of the peculiarly shaped vessel revealed it was perfectly shaped to direct harsh alcohol vapours away from the nose. The neat glass, standing for naturally engineered aroma technology, squeezes the lighter molecules of ethanol out of its opening, leaving behind the heavier, more enticing molecules within whiskey. So it's a glass supposedly well suited for appreciation, but also for people new to the spirits category in general, for its ability to negate harsh aromas. So the claim to fame of the neat glass is that its shape removes the nose burn from the alcohol in whiskey. By dissipating the nose burn, you're able to better identify and enjoy the subtle flavours. Drinking from it, though, may take a little getting used to, because you can see there, it's like a vase rather than a glass, and I'm going to have some fun getting this in my mouth, I suspect. So, let's see, Glentauchers, 12-year-old, sherry cask matured, single cask, 54.7%. So, you can see tears. Yeah, it's got a large bowl, this one. Quite a wide rim on it. Let's see. Now, I've heard it said you're better to go for the middle, but slightly to the side, but halfway across between the middle of the top and the edge. And yeah, I mean, this is 54.7. I suspect you're getting more of the aroma of the whiskey here with this glass. And what I'm getting are juicy raisins, berries, and a touch of zesty pineapple with sweet roasted malt. Dried banana chips, strawberry laces, leather, a touch of pepper, rhubarb and ginger, and there's hints of licorice, barley sugar and pear drops. We'll try them out. This will be fun. Caramel, barley, dates, and apricot jam, with a dash of peppery spice on the tail. chocolate orange, cinnamon, sherry sweetness. It's juicy and it's mouth coating. Mouth coating with plenty of fruit and sherry with a hint of honeyed cashew nuts. And you get nutty notes of maple and pecan tart with flaky pastry, boozy sultanas and candy orange. Maple syrup, raspberry jam, custard creams, and a lovely warming spice. It's fresh and vibrant. Sherry toffee, more rhubarb and red spiced apples. And the sweetness in the fruit builds nicely and creates great balance. And the finish is caramel, barley, dates, fruity, peppery spice. Medium length, I would say. So I'm going to add half a teaspoon, about 4 or 5 drops of water. And it's floral and fruity. Plums, orange, cherries. There's also brown sugar. Caramel, honey, tobacco, leather, and a sort of typical sherry cask maturation. It's a very engaging nose. I've just noticed while nosing this that this glass, although it's a neat glass, is actually on the bottom has the Fetter Cairn livery. Not tasting any Fetter Cairn tonight. It's got the unicorn, and I didn't realise that this was a Fetter Cairn livery glass. We'll have to do a Fetter Cairn tasting with that. So let's see what the mouth is like with this. Sherry, oakwood, and again the sort of cherries. It's creamy, and the 54.7% ABV is well integrated. And I have to say, I do prefer this one with about a half a teaspoon of water. Right. And it's sweet and fruity in the beginning, up to the finish, and then espresso, tobacco, and it's a medium long finish. So So we've got here a 12-year-old ex-sherry cask matured whisky for what I thought was a decent price. I think it's about £60 or so. Independently bottled by Duncan Taylor for the single cask series. It's got a lovely mouthfeel. It's dense and heavy. And just the reduction with water offers a highly velvety and buttery texture. I would say, being critical, I've had the Glentauchers from Gordon and MacPhail, and you do feel that the Glentauchers character feels rather subsumed by the impact of the sherry, and the complexity levels have been lessened as a result. But from an enjoyment, and purely from an enjoyment point of view, it's both exceptionally tasty and decadently rich. So we'll cleanse our palate. So now we have a Signatory vintage secret Speyside, or actually it doesn't say secret Speyside in model, it says Speyside, and in brackets it has an M. 2011, 13-year-old, 100 proof edition, 57.1%. So purportedly it comes from an unnamed Speyside distillery, beginning with an M, and it's from their Imperial Proof collection. So the Imperial Proof 100 proof would be 57.1% ABV. Signatory vintage, they were founded in 1988 by Andrew Symington, and it's a top independent bottler of Scotch whisky in Scotland, and they're known for their wide range of high quality single malt scotches. I've got a few Signatory vintages, and it gets its name from the practice of having each whisky cask signed by an esteemed person as a mark of quality. Pity it's not a bottle. They focus on transparency and authenticity, and unlike some whiskies that add colour or use chill filtration, Signatory keeps its whiskies natural, which gives a truer taste of the whiskey's original character. And they have a large selection of whiskies. They offer single malts, grains and blended malts from many of the Scottish distilleries, and they range from young to old and to rare whiskies, and some are even from closed distilleries. And so it's a key source for rare Scotch whisky. And their cask selection is picked for its unique features and taste. And the range includes the Unchill Filtered collection with whiskies at 46% ABV or more, and then the Cask Strength collection with whiskies at their natural strength, and it's known for its single cask whiskies, which are very limited and collectible. And we know that each single cask bottle is unique, showing a specific time from the distillery. So Signatory bought the Edradour distillery in Pitlochry in 2002, and it can now then mature their cask in-house. And they use Edradour's traditional warehouses, which lets them control the maturation process. And it lets them finish their whiskies in different cask types, including sherry, port and wine. And they've had recognition in the whisky industry. They've won many awards. Their focus on detail and quality over quantity appeals to those who love fine single malt whisky. So what have we here? This is a 13-year-old Speyside open bracket close bracket from 2011, and it was aged in a mix of first fill and refill Oloroso sherry butts. Although it says on the bottle, I notice it was first fill Oloroso sherry butts. So perhaps the refill isn't involved in that at all. And that is somewhat reminiscent of the iconic releases from the golden era of this iconic distillery, which is, of course, the one that rhymes with Macallan. So this is a Macallan, bottled at 100 proof, 57.1%. It promises to be packed with flavour and is sure to spark high demand. I got this one this week from the Whisky Exchange for a 13-year-old. It's not a single cask, but it's not far off it. I don't know how many bottles they had. 100 proof, 57.1% ABV, non-chill filtered, uncoloured, Macallan, indie bottled. I got this for £45 and it's still available. For this one, I've decided to use the 1920s professional blender's glass. So this is a modern recreation of a style of glass used by blenders in the 1920s. This one was developed in partnership with whisky writer Angus MacRail. The onion shape is supposed to help concentrate the aromas and flavours. As you can see, it probably does. Leading to a greater sensory experience. And it holds quite a large chunk of whisky, 225 mils. It was largely forgotten, but it's been authentically reproduced to its original design. And this has fantastic tears, this whisky, and it's a lovely colour. You can see the dark hue there coming from the sherry butt. So let's see, Macallan, indie bottled. And there's lots of sherry influence. Dark soaked fruit. There are hints of sulphur and hints of furniture polish. I'm getting figs, cherries, charred oak, and there's also some honey. And it's very nice, and it smells like Christmas. And then the oak makes its presence felt. And it's quite a big oak, but not overpowering road. And it's in a beautiful balance with the Christmas spices in the form of cloves, allspice, nutmeg, and cardamom. So let's see what the mouth of this tastes. And although you've got lots of sherry on the nose, this is quite vibrant. Liquid Christmas cake. And the alcohol sits, and you get the faintest hint. Well, it's punchy, but it's not hot. Still lots of sherry influence, soaked fruits, Christmas pudding in a glass, some tannins, grape skins, ginger and pepper. It's tingling with baking spices, and the Christmas vibe is great. And with time, the flavours evolve. I'm getting chocolate, citrus orange oil. You get new leather, a hint of ethanol from the ABV. It's less sweet than you would expect. You get the oloroso, gingerbread, dark chocolate, and dry oak, but it's not astringent in any way. I would describe this as anything but an easy sipper. Uh, the mouth and the head are kept busy with a deep, powerful, and profound, sometimes slightly ashy taste experience. It's full of character, heavy, and lots of little corners and edges to discover. And the alcohol is a little more alarming than it was in the nose, but it's still well within enjoyable limits. And the finish is very, very long. Raisins, tannins, with a metallic note, dry oak, and some pepper. Water, yeah. Let's see. I've added 5 just to see where we go with that. There's wonderful tears in this, absolutely beautiful. Sorry, nose. And there's still a lot of sherry in nose, but it's quite vibrant. And you still get that liquid Christmas cake. But now the alcohol sits and stays in the glass. There's a faintest hit of cloves, roasted oak, ginger spice, orange marmalade, and something a bit mushroomy and teriyaki sauce. Try them out. That's interesting. It's sherry driven, but it's not got some of the spices you would expect from a sherry cask matured, fully sherry cask matured single malt. There's a hint of citrus and slight caramel, even Karamak bar note. The alcohol is still punchy enough to make it quite interesting. It's a gingery, warming, and enjoyable. And I suspect this is going to get better if it's allowed to unwind and relax in an open bottle for a few months. Or even better, put into a decanter, why not? A dribble of water makes it rounder, more caramel sweetness, more coffee, and it takes off the hot edge and brings out a little more chocolate. Ginger remains, but it's less prickly. And the finish is to medium length. I get quite a bit of citrus in the finish, and the alcohol tends to linger. You know, you can still find this for around £45. And comparing it cost-wise to Macallan official releases, that's quite remarkable. It's half the price. And you know, Signatory Vintage is aimed at enthusiasts. And I highly recommend this Macallan Secret Speyside, open bracket, close bracket. In my opinion, this is a wonderful example of what good sherry cask maturation can achieve. It's powerful at first due to its high alcohol percentage, but with some added water, it gets more subtle and highly quaffable, with the sweet, musty, and fruity sherry cask aromas getting up to the front. I paid £45 for this bottle, and the price-value ratio is unbeatable, especially when you consider the price for original or core range bottles by Macallan. This stuff is highly recommended. I got it from the Whiskey Exchange. So, 3 cracking sherry cask matured single malts, starting with the Octave Glen Garioch, which allowed the spirit to shine without being overpowered by the cask. And the malty sweetness associated with Glen Garioch was not lost, and it was perfectly balanced with the Octave sherry influence. The Glentauchers was more heavily influenced by the sherry maturation, but is decadently rich. The Macallan from Signatory Vintage is simply the best Macallan I have had, and that includes a couple of Speymalts from Gordon and MacPhail. As for the tasting glasses, for that very special whiskey and for a very special guest, I think the aesthetics of the 1920s professional blender's glass would be hard to beat. And it is an exceptional amplifier. But I suspect cleaning this is going to be a bit difficult because of the quite small opening. You can barely get in with your hand, 2 fingers at most, and not even all that much. So a towel is going to be very difficult. But at least the tulip is not as high as many wine glasses these days. You can still reach the base of the tulip with your fingers, just about. And I haven't had this for a while now. And there's another minor thing. The onion shape seems to attract dust like no other glass, which would be easy to solve by turning it upside down or storing it in a cupboard. The neat glass, this chap, would be an interesting experience for our guest as well, but drinking from it I found a little challenging. A little too challenging for me. The opening of the glass is much wider than the others, and but then so is a potential sweet spot for nosing. It's not directly in the middle of the opening. It's actually to the side slightly. between sort of halfway between the midpoint and the edge. And it does give a different nosing experience. The alcohol is dissipated and the complex flavours are allowed to shine, which may be because the glass is shorter. So you're able to get your nose closer to the spirit. But there is definitely a marked difference. The mini Glencairn is just a bit too small for me. But I have to say, the full-size Glencairn is still going to be my favourite glass. You get everything with it. Nothing escapes you, alcohol included. I'm so used to the Glencairn, and I'm able to enjoy the complex flavours underneath the alcohol. So hey, look, a happy, healthy and trouble-free new year to go, and thanks for watching. Slàinte mhath.